Okay, welcome back, everybody. And I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing two amazing poets tonight. First of all, we're going to start with Joanna Lilley, who has come all the way from the Yukon. Is that right, Joanna? Yeah, just to read for us, no other reason. No other reason at all. Yeah. It's fabulous. Joanna Lilley is the author of Endlings, a collection of poems about extinct animals, which won the Fred Kerner Book Award in 2021. She's also the author of the poetry collections If There Were Roads and The Fleece Era, which was nominated for the Fred Cogswell Award. She wrote the novel Stones, which was longlisted for the Caledonia Novel Award, and a short story collection, The Birthday Books. She loves sharing the joy of words and has given readings and workshops as far afield as Alaska and Iceland. It's pretty impressive. Born in the south of England, Joanna lived in Wales and Scotland before moving to Canada, and now she lives in Whitehorse in the Yukon, where she co-founded Yukon Words and is grateful to reside in the traditional territories of the Kwanlin Dün First Nation and the Ta'an Kwäch'än Council. In 2021, she received Commissioner of Yukon's Borealis Prize for literary contribution. Please welcome Joanna Lilley.
Thank you so much. It is a huge honor to be here. I haven't given a live reading for a while, so I'm a little nervous, a little rusty. So thank you in advance for bearing with me. But it's just, yeah, it's just fabulous. I love the poetry community here, and it's just a real blessing. So thank you. So I'm going to start with a couple of newer poems. Yes, thank you. There we go. How's that? Does that sound good? Yeah. I'll get a bit closer. There you go. A bit rusty, I said today. A couple of newer poems, and this is part of a project initiated by Dr. Jennifer Calkins with an S, and she's down in the US, and last year 21 species were taken off the Endangered Species Act, which sounds like a good thing, but sadly it's because they're believed to be extinct. So it means they're no longer going to have any protection, etc. So Jennifer created this amazing project, brought together visual artists and poets and writers, and we were given a species. So I'm going to read the poem that I've written about the tubercled blossom pearly mussel. And it's a freshwater mussel in the southeast rivers of the United States. And this is called Riffles and Shoals. In riffles and shoals, your foot in the gravel, you wash the waters. Deepening by day, rising in the dark, we muddied the waters. Marsupial mother mimicking minnows, you cleared the waters. Flinging off offspring to hitch a gill lift, we silted the waters. Growing shells of your own to sink you to riverbed, you strained the waters. You've been gone so long as a lifetime, we dammed the waters. Too late to retract your foot from the grave, you washed the waters. And the next poem, I'm realizing this is a kind of, but here we are in 2024. And so Jennifer also asked if I would write a poem that was sort of more general about this idea, this project, which was quite hard to do. It's sort of so abstract, but she sort of gave me some information, and that was really helpful. And I sort of latched in onto this concept of the rivers that I was talking about in the southeast US, where many of these species have disappeared from, as far as we know. So this is a little bit of a speculative poem. I don't usually write speculative fiction or poetry, so this was a little bit of a different direction for me. So it's called Skin Bearer. The scientist watches American children jump from sunlit rocks to shade and dives in after them. Desmids, diatoms, algae, protozoa, plankton filtering through her teeth as she somersaults back to being waterborne before she's airborne. Lying afterwards on a high slab, she counts the microbes drying on her skin with her lavender vision. The scientist knows how it's all connected. She knows what needs to be collected to expose the deep blue sea print of an invisible universe that she'll float downriver to the waterverse each day until a species salvages it. The scientist sits up to unfold and flick her wings. She flies through violet sky against the current, yawing from sun to shirk the shadow human offspring will always look up to check. I'm kind of editing that as I read it because it's still on, it's still a work in progress. So thank you. Yes. Okay, and I'm going to read some poems that actually I still edit as I read them, even though, it's kind of a never-ending process, hey, writing poetry. So this is all about extinct species. And it's called Endlings. And Endlings was a word a friend of mine told me about as I was writing these poems. And it means the very last creature of that species. And I just thought it was a very beautiful word. And it's not really made it into dictionaries. I haven't checked lately, but it's an interesting word. You'll find it online and articles and so on, but it hasn't quite got that recognition. So maybe I may help with that a little bit. I don't know. So this first poem is about the dodo, which is probably the most famous extinct, the poster bird species for extinction, maybe. And it's written, I wrote quite a few poems in here trying to write them from the point of view of the species or a being in that species. And the dodo was last sighted by humans in 1662, apparently, and they were hunted and eaten by sailors who landed on the island. So Mauritius, you should say, Indian Ocean. I have notes because I have trouble remembering all the details. So this is called The Flightless Bird of Mauritius. And I should also say, now the introduction is going to be twice as long as the poem. I went to a lot of natural history museums when I wrote these poems, which was wonderful, pre-COVID, a wonderful privilege. And I would sort of meet the skeletons, the fossils, and then sometimes a poem would come. And this was a very sad skeleton of a dodo in the Natural History Museum, Smithsonian. And I mentioned this in the poem, but there was a little bit of dust on the skull, and I just thought that was really sad. I'm a poet, not a scientist, so here we are. So this is called The Flightless Bird of Mauritius. No, I have nothing to say, no need, everyone knows me. There is no requirement to register, remark on what is already recorded. By all means, stare instead at the over-middened moa, my Antipodean protector, or the ivory-billed woodpecker, full-feathered forest dweller. What? Did you say there was a tree named after me? I would point out, perhaps, as you are looking, that this is not all actually me. I am bits of others, a borrowed carpal, vertebral rib, an ersatz ulna. My maxilla and mandible are mine, my patelli, left and right. I wouldn't be myself without my kneecaps. There's no mention of the size of my kneecaps, how I ran over rocks and roots across the palm savanna into ebony shade. Such injustice, necrotic silence. You like your lie that I was clumsy, plump, and bumbled into nullity. If I were asked, thank you, I would only say there is no air here, just dust, this itching skull cap proving familiarity's neglect. And I cannot digest. I cannot form flesh to cover this ghastly cage. I need my gizzard stones. No one thought to pick those out of the mud on my hot island when they dug up my bones. You are not the only ones who need tools. Who? without them would be as obliterated as me. Maybe we need some happy poems after this. And then, so this was another poem written from the point of view. This one is for the Desmostylus hesperus, which was a wonderful creature who lived about 28 million years ago to 7 million years ago. And they were in existence for about 21 million years. And what I wanted to do with this book is not just go on and on about how humans have wiped out all these species, which is obviously a big part of it, but I wanted to try and go back to before we existed and honor and try and hear the voices, as it were, of those species as well. I didn't want it to be entirely human kind of centric. So this is called Water Diviner. And I love swimming and I love water, so it was sort of fun to imagine I was this wonderful hippopotamus-like creature wallowing, water diviner. Sand or shingle sliding in. I am burly, broad, firm-footed. I have found my rock to straddle, slosh, and anchor. Water sleep is a sluggish grace for those who are bulky on land. Water is the color of me, flat-headed, only my eyes and nostrils popping the surface tension. Low-bellied, forelegs right-angled, braced. I aim my trowel head at mud roots. I move up the estuary for the food I know I eat, though my stone-turned bones won't tell. I bequeath my bullet-case teeth, my cask of ribs, my spine of wooden cotton reels, my neck as thick and cluttered as a fir cone. My genes will perish with my progeny, yet I am elephant, I am hippopotamus, I am every swim and wallow in the cooling waters of the ring of fire. And this poem is about, this is actually from the point of view of a human being, Georg Wilhelm Steller. I apologize to people who know how to say that properly, who was part of the Great Northern Expedition, who was shipwrecked in 1741 in the Bering Sea, and they crashed into Bering Island, and there were some survivors, pretty amazingly. So this is from, again, I did a lot of research. A lot of this is factual, and then of course I tell a little story which may not be entirely factual. I sit on my cold rounded rock, bound in salted seal skin, facing a thin daylight fire, stones stacked high to keep out the unceasing wind, gaps caulked with kelp. Thank God I seized my quill and ink from the ribs of the wreck still sinking. I keep the ink pouched next to my skin to slow the freezing. The quill, too, bent and blunted, the bedraggled feather tickling my armpit. The men save feathers for me now as they pluck puffins and the biggest cormorants I've ever seen. They will keep me writing as if I am a talisman. The alphabet is all that keeps us human, that and shivering. We should become these giant beasts I watch, tidal boulders wallowing low, endlessly eating algae, seagrass, kelp. Their meat is as good as beef, their fat like butter. Their oil doesn't smoke or stink if it pulls too long. We use pots of their own skin to store their oil. Their hides are as tough as leather without curing. A cobbler could make boots. I saw a man cut out a chunk of flesh before he let the animal swim away, blood blackening the sea. We say these nameless beasts don't feel, though they bash their heads against our numb legs to save their kin. We've heard them moan. Our dead lie downwind on the slimy beach. Theirs must rot in the thickening water the living swim among. So that's inspired by the Steller's sea cow, which is an amazing 10-meter long sea creature who seemed to be very unwary, I don't know if that's a word, of humans. So obviously very easy prey, and obviously these men were shipwrecked and they ate whatever they could. So it's quite fascinating. And again, I was lucky enough to go to natural history museums. And again, in the Smithsonian, I walked into a room, and there hanging from the ceiling was the skeleton of one of these creatures, a Steller sea cow. And it was quite moving. I still feel a bit, when I talk about it. It was just amazing. I don't know why exactly. And they really did form relationships. They could see them. So this person, who I'm writing from the point of view of, was a natural historian, so took a lot of notes and learnt. And I think you probably heard of the Steller's jay, and he's the name of many species, or colonial names at least. So yeah, fascinating, these beautiful Steller's sea cows who were only, and I have to check what the fact is here. So 27 years after Stella wrote about them, discovered them, they were gone. So we really had a big impact there. So it's very sad. I'm going to move along. So I will just keep talking. So this is a book of poems about extinct species. And then, of course, I broke my rules because that's what you do. You can't really follow those sorts of rules. So this poem is about a species who isn't quite gone. It's the northern white rhinoceros. And so the last male has gone and inspired this poem. There are 2 females left, and there was some news coverage just recently about work. I knew that work was going on, but some progress being made to, I think the 2 females can't, what's the word? They can't. Yeah, they can't. Sorry, I'm trying to think of the word. If they were implanted with an egg, they wouldn't be able to gestate. Thank you. Anyway, so again, yeah, extinction, de-extinction, huge topics, much material for poetry. So this one is about the last male northern white rhinoceros, and this is called White. The best job in the world is the worst job in the world. You scratch behind his ears. You slot hay into his letterbox mouth. You give him a belly rub. He's the last male northern white rhinoceros in the world, and you're stroking his sagging tarpaulin skin. You carry a gun. The poachers want his horns, even though they've been partly sawn off to try to protect him. You don't put down the gun when you flap your hands. When you flap your hands, the rhinoceros runs. He likes to play and run. He likes to be visited. The vet comes often now that the last male northern white rhinoceros's belly is always on the ground. His semen is safely stored. There are plans and funding drives. The vet will come today. You won't put down your gun. You'll make sure that what's left of the last male northern white rhinoceros's horns rot in the earth beside his banisters of bone and Carhartt hide. So I'm going to read you a last poem now. And this is called It's Time to Talk of Hope. Just so we don't all just, give up. It's time to talk of hope. It's time to talk of human evolution with a tapered blue mug of Earl Grey and a slice of spelt toast, while my dog rests her head on your feet and your dog lies behind me, watching through the window for a yellow car. Sapiens are still becoming, we agree. Evolution never stops, of course, as long as moon and earth twist in locked rotation around an ending sun. Perhaps we can delay our inevitable extinction by persuading our DNA into a kinder transmutation. Perhaps we can augment our aptitude for wonder. In a single solar orbit, we discovered the existence of another 18,000 species. A Tinkerbell fairy fly fits 4 times inside a millimeter. A koala's fingerprints are the same as ours. A starfish, losing an arm, will grow another. Let us practice our amazement in case it saves us. Let us bend to count a slug's 4 noses instead of drowning it in a plastic pot of beer. Thank you very much.
Wow, let us practice our amazement in case it saves us. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Oh, I lost it. That's what you did, Joanna. I couldn't even find my paper. Okay. I would like to welcome now Sneha, Madhavan, and Reese. Sneha is the author of 2 poetry collections, Observing the Moon, which was a finalist for the 2013 Alfred G. Bailey Prize, and Elementary Particles, which is a collection from Brick Books that we're celebrating tonight. Sneha's writing has appeared in publications around the world, including Best Canadian Poetry in English, and her work has been shortlisted for national and international awards. She won the ARC Poetry Magazine's Diana Bremner Prize and was a shortlist for the Montreal International Poetry Prize and was in their anthology, amongst others. And she currently serves on the editorial board of Campus Magazine and lives with her family in Ottawa. So she's literally come all the way from Ottawa to be with us tonight. Please welcome Sneha.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you to the whole team at Planet Earth Poetry for inviting me. Thank you to all the open mic readers and to Joanna for that brilliant reading. And thanks to everyone here for being part of this evening. I am thrilled and so grateful to be here in Victoria to share my new book with you. First, I want to say a word about the cover. It's got this beautiful deep purple background with these white lines, straight curved spirals on it. And this is actually a detail of a photograph of particle tracks in a bubble chamber, courtesy of CERN. So I was really thrilled that we were able to use it. And a word about the title. Elementary particles are the smallest bits of matter that make up the entire universe. And they're often called the building blocks of the universe. So when I was putting this book together, I thought about that idea in 2 ways. One is how our lives are like these ephemeral, ever-changing particles. And the second is how each of the poems in this book is like a building block and they all come together to tell a story. I'm going to start with a poem called Rosa Parks. The day her body was laid out for viewing, I was getting nothing useful done, so I left work early and drove downtown. The line of people wound all around the Museum of African American History. I wouldn't get to see her. The wait would be hours. I brought no coins to feed a meter, and there was nowhere else to park. A man approached to offer me all the change in his pockets. I'll always have fond memories of Detroit. This next poem is called Mapping. My father grew up in a small village in South India where the only industry is making rope by hand from coconut husk fibers. And I grew up in Michigan where we use the palm of our hand as a map. Mapping. I was raised near the jutting out knuckle on the thumb of my right hand. A native Michigander, I was never without a map of the state, its lower peninsula shaped like an open palm. My lifeline traced the path of I-69. We took school field trips to Lansing in my palm center and vacationed at the tip of my pinky in the sands of the Sleeping Bear Dunes. We went on longer trips to India to visit my parents' relatives. In rural Kerala, no one uses maps. Our driver navigated unmarked roads by calling out to locals from his window. They told him by landmark where to take a turn. Finally, my father recognized the walled streets of his village, and from the road, he showed me the house where he was born, though it wasn't in our family anymore. We couldn't drop in for tea. In a clearing, women took nimble backward steps as they spun coir rope from the fibers of coconut husks. If he had never left this place, one of those women would be me. Watching them work, I turned my palm fingers down to map my father's hometown. Here it is, in the first segment of my index finger, under the thatched roofs of the Malabar coast, at the edge of the Arabian Sea. My father was a huge influence on my life, particularly my early life. This is a short poem about our relationship called Teachings. Before each semester began, my father and I reviewed his class list, and I taught him how to pronounce the names of all his students. For days, he practiced shaping Barbara's R's without tapping his tongue to the roof of his mouth, and relaxing into Pamela's subtle vowels, so unlike the always articulated syllables of his mother tongue. He didn't need to prepare any lectures. Chemistry was his second nature. But he repeated the names aloud to himself, recorded his voice on tape, and played it back until he was satisfied that he could take the first day's attendance. This next poem is my salad dressing poem. It's called 2000 Island. The only time I tasted you was in a fast food restaurant on an elementary school field trip. I heard myself saying your name only because the girl in front of me had asked for you. Her name was Amy. Amy was confident and popular, and she knew about things like salad dressing. I had never eaten a salad in my life. Our house always smelled of Indian curries. I didn't know the names of different dressings, even that there were different dressings, or even that there were such things as dressings. It was maybe 8. I was maybe grade 3. I was maybe 8. It was maybe grade 3. I don't remember where we were going, but I remember Amy's voice. I listened carefully so I'd know just what to order. When you arrived, orange and tangy, you tasted horrid, but I was happy. Perhaps I could find my way in this world after all. This next poem is called Four, and it starts with an epigraph by Pablo Neruda, which reads, "Is four the same four for everybody?" My mother draws her four with a right angle. My father's is pointed on top. My daughter's four, half the time, is backward. Her sister signs, tucking a thumb into her raised palm. I just adore four, Big Bird sings, the number for me on an old record. Old, meaning from a time when every kid knew how to drop a needle into a spinning vinyl groove. 4 forces govern all things in the universe. Carbon's 4 valence electrons form the basis for all life. Our 4 limbs and 4-chambered hearts, a 4-leaved clover's lucky leaves. My father shows me how to write the number 4 in Malayalam. Nale, a round house with a curve of smoke escaping. He says no one uses these characters anymore. The poems in this book are mostly family poems, but I also love science, and I use science quite a lot in my writing. This next poem is a love poem that I wrote for my husband that is inspired by the creation of the universe. Cosmology. We used to think love was easy to find. We were quarks in the first femtoseconds of the universe. bound by nothing, unaware of broken symmetries around us. We were drawn together by forces we could not understand. Light scattered in every direction. We held each other tightly, the nucleus of the smallest element. Electrons bound, atoms condensed into quasars, luminous and all-consuming. Dust collapsed into fiery stars, radiating energy, populating the ether with heat. We could not say what led to this place, from where this cold and darkness. Ice and rock smashed together and created bigger rocks. We found ourselves in the curved arm of a barred spiral galaxy, on a molten planet orbiting a dwarf star. Bombarded by the past, it took time for molecules to form membranes and cells, little rooms where life could begin. We learned to catch the light, to make food and breathable air. We learned to breathe, to open our eyes and see the earth that we evolved beside. We learned to make music. We used to think love was easy to find. Now we know the universe expands from an unchangeable beginning to an unknowable end. Dark energy is impossible to define. What we know sustains us. You know this poem is narrow because I wrote it on a bookmark. I know it was you who found it, covered in illegible marks on the floor beside our bed, because you saved it on my desk for me to find in the morning. The next poem I'll read is called Samsara, which is a Sanskrit word that refers to the cyclic nature of life and also to the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Samsara. We planted your placenta under a peach tree. Your sisters went under the tomatoes in our new garden. We didn't want to leave it in the care of strangers, so the peach sapling we put on a friend's farm. Your sisters went under the tomatoes in our new garden. That first year, the tomatoes were prolific. The peach sapling we put on a friend's farm because we were leaving our old house that same month. That first year, the tomatoes were prolific. We had more than we could eat. Even the squirrels got fat. Because we were leaving our old house that same month, we knew we'd never taste the peach tree's fruit. We had more than we could eat. Even the squirrels got fat. After that, we had everything we could want, though we knew we'd never taste the peach tree's fruit. We did not plan to return to the land of your birth. After that, we had everything we could want, though we didn't want to leave it in the care of strangers. We did not plan to return to the land of your birth, so we planted your placenta under a peach tree. One place that I often find inspiration is in articles that I read. And I came across an article about a scientific study that showed that some species of dung beetle navigate by the light of the Milky Way. So this poem is called Dung Beetles. It takes tenacity to survive on others' shit. To fly into a fresh pile, still steaming, to break off a piece and roll it into a ball for easy transport. To roll it backwards with head to the ground, blind to rocks or holes in the road. It takes geometry to roll it in a straight line, always a straight line. A famous poet once told me the best poems are nonlinear, but a straight line is the quickest escape from would-be thieves. Thieves abound in the chaos of the mound, so the male beetle rolls his ball away as straight and as far as he can. If a rock bars his path, he moves around it, then continues to roll. If he falls from a height, he climbs atop his ball and dances, then continues to roll. At night, never mind the lack of polarized skylight. Under the new moon, dung beetles roll their balls in straight lines. Never mind their tiny dorsal eyes, too poor to resolve particular stars. The steady brushstroke of the Milky Way is visible even to a beetle rolling a ball of dung. Never mind poetry's nonlinear logic. It takes faith to navigate by a galaxy. The last section of this book, most of the poems that are in the last section were written during the last few years of my father's life. And it was when I was rereading these poems that the structure for the entire book became clear to me. So I like to think that this book is one of my dad's last gifts to me. This poem is called Ritual. Since I don't believe in life after death, I cling to this life, to the china teacups, fragile and imperfect, demanding my deliberate love. Since I don't believe in a personal God, I hold fast to ritual, to morning walks in darkness, past the stonecutters with their broad shoulders hardened from years of bringing down mountains, and past the soothsayers, calling on believers to come and hear their fortunes. They cry out as I pass, ever hopeful for a convert. But I don't believe in conversion, only transformation. The sun's rising ever later as winter comes, the teacups shattering as it hits the spinning earth. My father comes to me in a dream. I sit at a small round table in front of a window overflowing with light. A young man slides into the chair beside me. I know a way to escape, he says. It is unmistakably my father, younger than I have ever known him. His hair is oiled and combed. He is dapper in a red sweater. I do not realize until that moment that I am trapped inside a column of light. Above and below and behind me is all aglow. But I am not alarmed or afraid. I am overjoyed to be with my father. There is no one else who knows me. I think of Dad while buying a sandwich. He always knew what it would be, BLT. Never checked the menu, just asked, BLT? I can still hear his voice, how he pronounced BLT. It was the first sandwich he ever bought, a BLT. In a new country, it was easy for him to say BLT. After that, it was the only sandwich he ever bought, a BLT. If Dad were here, he'd be asking for a BLT. There are things that sound better to me than BLT, but Dad will be here if I order a BLT. This next poem is called Sing Me an Indian Song. In the early morning darkness of our room, sunlight merely edging the closed blinds, her unexpected voice, unexpectedly sweet, without demand or expectation, only hope, asked for something that, in our household, in her life, only I could give. I snuggled close and sang a bhajan, a devotional song, the song my family and I sang in the last moments that my father's body remained intact on this earth. I thought of my father while I sang in Malayalam for my youngest daughter, his namesake. Joy rushed toward me from every hidden corner. I just have one more poem to read, and I want to say again, thank you to everyone here. This is the last poem in the book. It's called Frost Flowers. Frost flowers. Rootless, they require no soil. Their seeds are imperfections on the surface of the sea. They bloom when temperatures plummet and disappear sometimes within hours. If I could speak a native Arctic tongue, I would have told you this in the space of a single breath. They suck salt from the ocean. I could hold one in my mouth. By the thousands, they release aerosols that alter polar atmospheres. Their crystalline hollows, abundant with bacteria, are home to more life than the sea ice beneath them. If I could convey in words the splendor of such small things, I would not be afraid of living such a short time.
Thank you so much.